So I picked up the Superlight 2C last week because I wanted to see what Logitech has been up to. I mean, it seems like they've been asleep at the wheel when it comes to high performance peripherals for like the past couple years. This being their latest release and also the lightest mouse that they've ever made should give us a pretty good answer. I remember when Logitech used to be just leaps ahead of everyone else. I remember when I tried the very first G Pro Superlight. 60 grams, no cutouts, perfectly balanced, really good coating, and it had a battery life that seemed like it just lasted forever. But that was almost 5 years ago. Fast forward to today and we have what looks like the exact same thing, but I promise you it's different. It's the new Superlight 2C. The C stands for compact, so the shape, the aesthetics, the proportions, they're basically the same as what we all know at this point, the normal Superlight, but it does feel different to play with because it is about 5% smaller. Most of the size reduction is in the length of the mouse, but it is a bit narrower and shorter as well. For me, it's basically the difference between being able to claw grip the old one comfortably to now not being able to do that really at all because there's not enough palm support at the back. But for me, that's actually a good thing. I prefer to use a fingertip grip where I'm only holding the mouse with my fingertips. It's just what feels the nicest and most natural to me. And so this smaller size and lower weight, it feels a lot more comfortable than the old one. If you also play with a similar grip or maybe you just have smaller hands, it's definitely a direct upgrade compared to the previous one. The 2C, I can flick around a lot faster, it sits in my fingertips a lot more naturally, and I can actually feel that 10-gram difference as well, especially when tracking the direction changes of targets. I also think the ratio of how they've shrunken this one down is pretty spot on. It doesn't feel too narrow, which is really good. And although the height is irrelevant for fingertip grip, there is still some mass there if you want some of that palm contact, maybe just in a smaller form factor. But yeah, a bit more nimble. I'd be confident in saying that I do play better with this one. The problem is though, this isn't 2019 anymore. There are more than a few entire factories that have cracked the code on making pretty lightweight mice. So honestly, a 50-gram mouse in 2025 just doesn't feel that special. The barrier to entry now, even if you wanted to make a similar product, is actually shockingly low. So if that's what the budget end of the market can achieve, what does actual competition for Logitech look like today? Well, this is the X2 Crazy Light from Pulsar. If you've never heard of Pulsar, I don't blame you. They're kind of new, but out of all of the new mouse companies that have popped up recently, they're easily going the hardest, I think. They've done some pretty cool collabs recently, and they seem to be a little bit more creative and experimental than a lot of these other brands that just seem to be interested in cloning what's already out there. The real question is though, can they beat Logitech? Well, first of course, there's the weight, where the X2 Crazy Light is 25% lighter than the Superlight 2C, which I feel is just a massive difference considering these mice are like the same size, and on the exterior, they look pretty much identical. I feel like if Logitech made a 38-gram mouse today, it would be touted as this monumental breakthrough. Like, everyone would be talking about it, everyone in your ranked lobbies would probably go out and upgrade to it instantly. It would be really big news. But here we have Pulsar doing exactly that in just a plastic mouse. I mean, there's no excessive cutouts here at all. It's not an exotic material. And what's even more impressive is the build quality is pretty solid as far as I can see. There's no creaking and no flex. If you compare the internals of how the two are built differently, the Pulsar mouse is a lot simpler. Logitech put their switches on a different board, which is something that Razer are now doing as well with the Viper V3, and that's likely to get the physical switches a little bit closer to the actuators, but it does make for a somewhat unnecessarily complex design in my opinion. There's no tangible difference in click quality or build quality between doing this and not doing this. In fact, it's actually the Pulsar mouse that has the better feeling clicks. Now, of course, I am super biased when it comes to really lightweight mice, and it's why I made the Zero mouse at under 22 grams, but I've been chasing this super lightweight aiming feel for a long time, well before I made it into a product. I modded my own Superlight to be under 50 grams, and then I mained the M2K, which is 23 grams for like a year, and just really loved how those mice felt. Especially those direction changes that I mentioned, constantly tracking moving targets. It feels easier and more responsive because it is. And before you say, hey, if you can feel the difference of 13 grams, you should go hit the gym, I already tried that. I guess it didn't work because I can still feel the difference. I think the closer we can get to that unfiltered input of our hand and our fingertips, the better. Every time I now pick up a heavier mouse and try and aim with it, I'm reminded all over again of why I prefer these lighter mice. Of course, shape is super important as well, but if I took your favorite shape mouse and made it just 20 grams, I think you'd be blown away, honestly, by how good it felt. Now, there are some people who will say they just aim way too shaky on really lightweight mice, but I think there are other factors that are at play here. You might also be using a smaller, less stable shape. You might be using dot skates, and maybe you've also swapped recently to a faster mousepad. All of these things are inherently less stable, and if you are swapping to a smaller mouse at the same time and using a fingertip grip, don't forget that your sensitivity is higher when using fingertip grip because the sensor is further away from you, and so it just travels a further distance. I would say don't be afraid to just lower your sensitivity. I know it seems counterintuitive, but the really cool thing about these ultra lightweight mice is that if you're playing on a much lower sensitivity than what you're used to, it's not going to feel anywhere near as sluggish or laborsome as it would with a heavier mouse. Now, both of these mice use optical switches, and the feel and preference is really going to be down to each individual, but I'm going to say Logitech have been using these really snappy Omrons for a while now, and I just don't like them at all, especially if you're like me and you're pressing kind of like mid trigger where it's naturally a bit more stiff anyway. Yeah, these don't feel or sound great to me at all. The opticals in the Pulsar, on the other hand, they feel a lot more progressive and linear, just lighter and more bouncy, which is what I prefer. Something that really confused me though was when I tested the click latency of these mice. No surprises from Logitech, same as the Superlight 2 and overall really fast, but the Pulsar was a bit slower than I was expecting. I couldn't work out why this was, but then I loaded up the software and saw that they have a 2 millisecond debounce delay out of the box. Firstly, these are optical switches. The signal shouldn't bounce. Pulsar even say plenty of times they are double click free. And secondly, even if the signal is bouncing, whether that's from the contact on the inside of the switch or the actuator from like drag clicking or slam clicking, for example, there are ways to engineer around that without adding a single fraction of input delay. It's actually less work. I know it's only a couple milliseconds here and technically you can lower it, but I think that's beside the point. This doesn't need to be and shouldn't be a setting on a gaming mouse. And the fact that Pulsar haven't figured that out yet, it's just really odd. Logitech and many other brands haven't had debounce delay in their mice for years. On a better note, the sensor performance is basically faultless between these two mice, and you'd honestly have to be an alien to sense any difference between them. That's even with Logitech running their own branded Hero 2 sensor in the Superlight 2C. They claim some wild specs for this thing, and it is actually kind of crazy that they are the only gaming mouse company that are running a non-Pixar sensor. I remember there was that clip of Shroud where he's saying like if you're using a non-Logitech mousepad with a Logitech mouse, then you're pretty much cooked, and then everyone dunked on him because it's such a weird take, because obviously you can use whatever mouse you want with whatever mousepad and it functions absolutely fine. At the same time, you would be crazy to think that Logitech aren't doing even just a little bit of tuning, a little bit of calibration with their own branded home-cooked sensors and their own mousepad surfaces. How much does that actually make a difference in the real world? I think it's down to like the micron level, and at the end of the day, the surface of their own mousepads don't really look that different to what else is out there. And also, like, let's just face it, these sensors have gotten so good that they can track pretty much perfectly on any surface out there, even a blank white table like this. Pulsar are actually using their own branded PixArt sensor now, which is the XS1. Apparently it's a slightly higher spec 3950. Again, you'd have to be a different species to really notice any tracking or input disparity between these two mice. Some users claim like a floaty feeling with this XS1 sensor. I can't confirm any of that. It could just be different skates on the mouse or a different sensor position to what these people are used to. To me, both mice feel flawless, and even the input plots, when you're looking at every individual input coming through the USB port, I mean, both mice look totally normal. Both of these mice can also run at 8,000 Hertz polling rate, which I think is way faster than most people realize or appreciate. Even if you're playing on a 480 Hertz monitor, that is 16 mouse updates every frame that you're seeing. Again, that's on a 480 Hertz monitor, that is blazingly fast. If you're playing on a 240 Hertz monitor, 8K polling is 32 mouse updates every single frame. Don't get me wrong, it's really cool to nerd out and see that amount of input like flowing to your PC like a constant stream, but the thing is, the experience difference between 1K, 4K, and 8K polling is the same. It's not like you're getting extra frames sent to your monitor. Technically, you can have a slightly lower latency, more consistent input with those really fast swipes, but man, I'm gonna be real. If you can feel deviations of a fraction of a millisecond when you're swiping that fast, your DNA needs to be studied. Especially because with these higher polling rates, it is more strain on most people's systems out there as well. I mean, I run some pretty beefy specs, and even for me in Overwatch 2, I do see an increase in render latency. So the latency of my PC is actually increasing while I'm running these lower latency polling rates. So it just completely counters the point of using them in the first place. For the stuff that really matters though, I think that Logitech are getting pretty rinsed on a lot of stuff here. Like the weight, I mean, the weight matters a lot, and 38 grams just simply feels better than 51. There are things that Logitech is better at than Pulsar, like click latency, the firmware, the battery life, but the problem is these aren't like immediate tangible differences that people can actually feel when they hold the product in their hand. You know, the fact that the Pulsar is a $130 mouse with a debounce slider in the software, it's hilarious to me, but I mean, most people don't even know what debounce is, and to be honest, I don't see really anyone mention this yet. The shape is mostly subjective. Some people will prefer one over the other, but again, I do slightly prefer what Pulsar have done here with the Crazy Light. There's more tapering, the triggers feel a bit more inviting, and it's for these reasons that I do actually play better with it. So look, the bottom line is, if you are currently looking for an upgrade, maybe you want to try a smaller mouse and you were looking at the new Superlight 2C, maybe explore some other options. There are many out there that are lighter with better shapes and firmware that is close enough. Logitech is still really great in isolation though. This definitely isn't a bad product by any means, and if you're someone who has been using the regular shaped Superlight and you've always just wanted it to be a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter, then this is not going to disappoint you.